The Moss Report is brought to you by Mycolife, makers of the world's best mushroom extracts, including the Moss Method mushroom formula, available exclusively at mycolife.us. Hello, healers. My name is Ben, and this is the Moss Report. I'm here today with my father, author and founder of the Moss Report, Dr. Ralph W. Moss. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Ben.
So today we're going to be talking on the subject of pomegranates. Very interested to hear what you found on this subject as it relates to cancer. So what have you got for us today?
Well, pomegranates have been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years, in addition to the fact that, of course, they're delicious fruit and grow wild in the Middle East and the Near East. And so they're a very important product, and people generally love them and like to buy them fresh, which is wonderful, and also as juice. And then there are various extracts that have been made in addition to trying to turn them into a medicine, which hasn't been entirely successful. But they are available in various forms, and they've had enough clinical trial testing, unlike many of the things that you find in natural medicine. There actually have been clinical trials, and so we have the receipts, we have the goods on what they do and don't do, especially in relation to prostate cancer.
Oh, okay. Great. So you found some studies that have clinical trials on that. I want to definitely dig into that. But you said something that I'd like to sort of dig into a little bit before we get to those studies, and that is that pomegranates have been used historically as a kind of a home remedy but I haven't heard of that. So can you tell me a little bit about what the history of pomegranates for health has been?
Well, the rinds and the pith and the seeds have been used medicinally in Ayurvedic medicine, in ancient Greek medicine. I think they've been used for getting rid of worms and various usages. But that, of course, is all sort of prehistory in terms of medicinal use. Mm-hmm. In modern times, the fact that they're packed with antioxidants caught the attention of scientists. And so for the last 30 years, I would say, scientists have been delving into this. And the more they look, the more they find.
Okay, great. So these studies that you found, they are good studies? I mean, they come from reputable sources, I'm assuming. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them. Is that where you want to start? You want to talk about where the studies come from, or which one?
Sure.
Where should we start?
Well, we need to talk a little bit about the socioeconomic background of this. I'm sorry that, we have to get into the politics or the medical politics in a way, but let me very briefly say that there's one big pomegranate company in the United States, and that company has had its problems with the government, the FDA, and especially the Federal Trade Commission over making health claims for pomegranate. Some of which were deliberately provocative, like saying in one ad, I think they said, eat pomegranates or drink pomegranate juice and you'll live forever. Well, of course, nobody should take that seriously. Nobody did. But it was enough to provoke the government, the FDA and the FTC, to come down on them very hard. So you can't understand the history of these clinical trials until you understand that there was a financially big player behind the scenes.
And who was that?
That was the Palm Wonderful Company, which is a corporation that also owns Fiji Water and a big producer of almonds. The biggest landowner in California is that company.
Oh, really?
And that company is privately owned by two individuals, a husband and wife team. And they're quite interesting people. And they were into this whole pomegranate thing. They have some background with prostate cancer, some personal interest in prostate cancer.
I see.
And so that's where the money came from to do the clinical trials.
Okay.
So if I tell you that I found a mangosteen or some fruit that I think has anti-cancer activity, well, that's probably true, but very few of them went through the amount of clinical trial testing that pomegranate did, and that was because of the sponsorship of these husband and wife, this two-person team of billionaires who sponsored that work. But when they got into trouble with the government for making health claims, they seem to have pulled back from their support and sponsorship of pomegranate as a health item.
I see. But it is pretty widespread now. I mean, you see pomegranate products all over the place, but you're saying most of that is produced by this one company. And if the science was sort of funded by that company, doesn't that sort of call into question its overall, integrity or, unbiased?
Well, it's something you always have to look at is the financial interest of the people doing the study. But if we were to rule out every study that has somebody who has a vested interest in the outcome, there'd be very few studies.
Yeah.
So the most you can ask for is some transparency, right, because it's a big problem in the drug industry, for instance.
True. Were they sponsoring the studies, both of the studies, or however many studies that you've found that you want to talk with us about today?
I believe they were. I don't want to make a categorical statement about that, but I'm pretty sure they were.
Okay.
And there were two outstanding medical centers that were doing these studies. And one of them was in Los Angeles, University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and the other was at Johns Hopkins. And then there was a third study done with many scientists at many different institutions that came out of North Carolina. But I think all of them, ultimately, much of the funding for those studies came from that one source. But to me, it isn't an issue.
All right.
I think it's transparent who they were, what their interest was in it. It was no different than innumerable studies that we've discussed that have drug companies as financial supporters of different studies. So I'm okay with it. I think these studies are fine, but I do have my own reservations about one study that came out without so many positive results. But I'd rather talk, at least put my emphasis on the studies that were positive, because I think there are many lessons to be learned from this. And I think it's surprising how strong an anti-cancer effect there is and was to pomegranate, whether it's taken as a juice or as a powdered juice, or in a pomegranate fruit extract, which was initially patented by the same company and is called POMx, P-O-M with the lower letter case X, which has, to my knowledge, disappeared from the market. They probably still own the patent on that, but they basically were not able to launch this as a product, although at one time it was available. You could actually buy this. I think it was being added to a certain formula that they were selling. They tried to make a kind of quasi-medicine out of this, and that fell apart, as I say, as a result of a number of things, including the fact that the U.S. government at that time had come down hard on the company. Now, I even heard one famous scientist that I was interviewing refer in very, very, very negative personal terms to the sponsors of these trials. And so I think they in some quarters, got a bad reputation, and then people didn't want to be involved with this product. I have no problem personally with them or with them sponsoring that work. But one has to understand this, because otherwise, if I tell you, as I will tell you, these very, very positive results in prostate cancer, you're going to first question is going to be, or second question is going to be, well, why didn't this get further? Why wasn't this developed? Well, there's the backstory on that.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I'm glad that you feel confident enough about these studies, regardless of the sponsorship, that the results were positive enough to want to share with our audience. So we're going to jump right into that.
And I should say, Ben,
Yeah.
I'm positive enough about it that I take pomegranate powder myself, involved with my own history of prostate cancer. So not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk, and
Right.
I feel that confident enough. And
And you do mention pomegranates in, there's more than a mention of pomegranates in the Moss Method book,
right.
your latest book, which includes a lot of different natural compounds and ways that they might help to fight cancer. So,
Right.
all right, do you want to get right into the first study and tell us what the numbers show?
Sure. There are hundreds of studies in PubMed referencing pomegranate and general health, immune system, cancer in general, hundreds.
Okay.
But for various reasons, the heavy duty research and what we're talking about pertains specifically to prostate cancer.
Oh, okay.
There were early laboratory studies, cell line studies, that seemed to indicate a bigger effect in prostate than in other cancers. But I feel that the positivity of the studies applies also to other cancers. So the first study is from Johns Hopkins, which, by the way, according to independent sources, is the #1 research medical school in the United States. So there's no question about the validity of this, and it comes from a good journal. It checks all the boxes in terms of a very fine, high-quality study. And it basically, you have to understand something first about how you would evaluate any substance in terms of its positive effects in prostate cancer. There is a concept or a number called the PSA doubling time, the PSA-DT. This is standardly used as a way of seeing whether or not you're positively impacting the recurrence or the growth of prostate cancer. In other words,
Doubling time?
so if let's say your PSA was 6, and at a certain point it's going to double to 12, that's a sign of progression usually of cancer. So
And
how
PSA,
long?
That's prostate specific antigen, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The standard marker or biochemical measure of how big the prostate's getting and how aggressive the growth of the prostate is.
Right.
And it
they
can go
measure
up.
and that number is an indicator usually of either the existence of cancer and then if you're measuring it when you know you have a diagnosis, then that number represents its progress or its growth. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a rough measure because everybody knows it's not perfect, but it is very important and very useful and still central to how oncologists and urologists look at where your prostate is and what its extent is and how aggressive the cancer is. The aggressiveness of the cancer can be indicated by the speed with which it grows naturally, and in particular, what its doubling time is. So as I was saying before, let's say you have a PSA of, let's say, 10. At a certain point, if it goes untreated and you have cancer, that's likely to increase to 20 or 30 or 40. But let's just take, in order to standardize different substances, let's just take the doubling time, meaning how much time did it take for your PSA score to go from 10 to 20.
Okay.
That gives you a way of measuring from one case to another how aggressive the cancer is and how much it's growing. That's a standard measurement in medicine and science, PSA doubling time.
Okay.
And so they did a study at Hopkins. It was a clinical trial, and they gave some of the people a placebo, and some of them got the extract that I talked about before, the commercial extract of pomegranate, total pomegranate, and that's called POMx. And the doubling time, you want it to be longer. You understand? Because
Yes.
then it's slower. It means it's growing more slowly. So in the placebo group, the group that got the dummy pill, if you will, of the look-alike pill of POMx, but didn't contain any pomegranate, the doubling time was about 1 year. It was 11.9 months. But in the group that got the pomegranate pill, the doubling time was 18 and a half months.
Oh,
So this
okay.
was a very, very significant effect that it had overall in
That's like
these patients.
50% better.
Something
50.
like
Well,
correct.
because if it's a year versus a year and a
Right,
half.
a year and a half, and now if you you see apparently you've slowed down the growth of the cancer, and we don't know, there are other effects possible too. So PSA is more a measure of the growth of the prostate than it is the growth of cancer per se. We see something very positive happening, and when you consider that it's non-toxic, there were no side effects, especially at the lower doses. I think some people if they took a high dose, they got a loose bowel. But by and large, pomegranates have been eaten for thousands of years and are generally regarded as safe things to have.
Okay. And this extract that they studied, POMx, that is just a straight up extract of pomegranate. They're not taking a particular molecule or turning it into a compound or doing something else to it. It's just pomegranate extract.
To my knowledge, that's the case.
Okay. Well, I mean, for a simple ingredient like that being added to the diet or as part of a protocol to get that much of an effect, it's pretty astounding.
It was, and it definitely raised some excitement in the scientific community and the general public. And it's one of the reasons that there was this fad, if you will, of eating pomegranates in the American public, at least, because of the advertising of it, of course, but also because this was very promising. There was a very interesting little sidelight on it. There was a high dose group and a low dose group. And there was a slowdown in the growth of both of them. There was no significant difference between the high dose and the low dose.
That's interesting.
I have a theory about it.
Okay, I'm always interested in your theories.
I'll return to this later in discussing another study, but I think that there are a lot of antioxidants, we know that, in pomegranate. It's very rich in antioxidants, ellagic acid being the most prominent of them. And then there are some that are unique to pomegranate itself. But if you have a deficiency in antioxidants, or put another way, if you have a lot of free radical activity going on inside your body, which promotes the growth of cancer and sometimes could be related to the origin of the cancer, if you take even a small amount of antioxidants through your diet, you're going to have a big effect. So some of the effect of the pomegranate is related to the antioxidants in the pomegranate juice.
So I just want to expand a little bit on the subject of antioxidants because we do get a number of comments on many of our videos that relate to people's concerns about the use of antioxidants, especially if they're being treated for cancer. And if you might also just briefly touch on, you mentioned free radicals. If you could tell us a little bit about what they are.
So there are these things called free radicals, also called singlet oxygen, meaning that these are, it's oxygen, not an O2, but it's an uncoupled oxygen that's looking for a partner and looking for another molecule that it can attach to. And this can do damage to tissues if you have a lot of these uncoupled or free radical oxygen molecules floating around. It can be harmful. It can hurt tissue. Now, there are circumstances in medicine where you want there to be free radicals. Free radicals are one of the ways that traditional, conventional cancer treatments work. So you're not entirely against having free radicals. They're a part of chemotherapy, a lot of chemotherapies, and a part of a lot of radiation therapies. However, that doesn't mean that you should or would ban all antioxidants. Antioxidants soak up free radicals. So, and that's one of the ways that they benefit you. You want to soak up the free radicals that are harming normal tissue. You don't want to interfere with the free radicals that are killing the cancer cells. So when you're in active treatment, it's a bit of a dance to protect the normal tissue while not interfering with the killing activity of the free radicals. This raises a lot of concerns in the oncology community. It's exaggerated because a lot of cancer chemotherapy doesn't work by generating free radicals, and radiation has numerous ways of killing cancer cells, one of which could be free radical attacks on the cancer cell, but there are many other ways as well. So it's a bit too complicated for us to fully go into in this discussion, but I'll just say as a general rule, and from my numerous discussions with oncologists, I would say that almost every oncologist I've ever discussed this issue with is fine with you eating foods that have antioxidants in them. Their concern comes about when you start multiplying by 10 or 100 or 1,000-fold the amount of antioxidants that you're taking into your system through supplements.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I don't think, I haven't seen one person who said don't drink pomegranate juice because it's going to interfere with a cancer treatment. Quite the opposite. They're very encouraging of you having many colorful fruits and vegetables in your diet while you're undergoing treatment. So it isn't really an issue, I would say, because we're not talking here about substances that are highly different from the pomegranate that you'd get in the store.
Thank you for that explanation. If I'm understanding, that also ties back to why you said earlier that you feel that this would be helpful for other types of cancer, not just prostate cancer. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So now you have another study to share with us?
Yes.
And what is this one about, and where does it come from?
It comes from the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. It's similar to the Johns Hopkins study in that it was a trial of this substance called POMx, which was an extract of pomegranate. The results were highly positive. In the group that got the POMx, the doubling time increased from 12.9 months to 14.5 months. So this was an increase. It wasn't quite as dramatic as in the earlier study. The interesting thing is that there were subgroups, pre-specified subgroups, meaning there was one group that got the placebo, and then there was a group that instead of getting the extract, the POMx extract, they used just pomegranate juice. They gave people a glass of pomegranate juice each day. So of the three, the group that got the extract had the least improvement. The group that got the extract had an increase from 12.9 months to 14.5 months. The group that got the placebo had an increase from 11.1 months to 15.6 months. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then the best one was the people who got the pomegranate juice. I'm laughing because, that's where it all began, pomegranate juice. A simple thing. You didn't need to make a medicine out of this. They had an increase from 12.7 to 20.3 months.
That's the same statistic of the doubling of the PSA time that we're talking
Correct.
about.
Yes. The
Almost a
PSA.
twofold improvement in the slowness of the growth of the prostate gland. That's amazing. With just a
a glass a day of pomegranate juice.
Amazing. Wow.
But it didn't do much for the people
Well,
pushing the POMx extract. You see, the people who had sponsored the study,
right.
And that was highly the increase from the juice was highly statistically significant. In other words, there was a minuscule possibility that was just due to chance.
And how do you explain this whole placebo effect then?
This is very interesting. Okay. And I would never have been able to explain it, except I saw the exact same phenomenon when I was an advisor to the National Institutes of Health, the Office of Alternative Medicine back in the 1990s. We saw a similar situation where people I think it was a trial on vitamin C. I'd have to go back and look. But the same thing happened. You saw an improvement in the placebo group. So what could cause that? Well, the one thing that comes to mind would be the psychological effect. You think you're getting the pill, but you're not, but you're still getting some boost to your immune system by your positive thoughts about it. But then you should have the same effect from the placebo as the actual substance. Here we saw a better effect. I don't know the name of this phenomenon, but I'll describe it to you. When somebody's in a clinical trial of a natural substance in particular, or a natural intervention, they're randomized. Some of them are going to get the treatment and some are not. And people have a tendency, not everybody, but there are people who have a tendency to try to ensure that they get the actual treatment by taking a supplement of that treatment or taking the thing. Now, of course, it's also it's in the forefront of their brain. They're in a clinical trial to test whether or not pomegranate juice is going to positively impact their prostate cancer. Right. And they're worried about their own rising PSA,
right,
as anybody would be.
Yeah.
And so they may not understand that they're interfering with the effects of the clinical trial because, quite understandably, they're focused on one person's prostate cancer, their own. Right. So there is a problem within clinical trials. It's pretty well known, I think, that the participant may interfere with the results by taking the treatment that's under study.
Interesting.
And when you see a big difference, I mean, between 11.1 months in the group that didn't get the placebo and the 15.6 months in the group that did get the placebo, this raises this strong suspicion that what you're looking at is the interference in the trial by the participants.
Right. I mean, because this is not something where it's some white, bland-looking pill where you don't even know what's in it. These people knew what they were being studied for. It wasn't just completely hidden from them that they were taking the pomegranate. They knew it was a pomegranate. So
had to. They found the study. They had to have been somewhat interested in the effect of natural medicines, and there's been a lot of publicity about this.
Right.
And they got into a trial, and then they think, oh my God, I might not be even getting the thing, and my life is at stake. Why not just...
I can totally envision that scenario where if I was being told that I might be getting a placebo, I wouldn't want to just get the placebo and be a statistic. No, I would want to get the effect. So I think your theory on that is probably pretty sound. So
I think it's a good theory even if I had never seen it before, but actually that was part of having that experience at the NIH as 10 years or so as an advisor. You see a lot of things, and that was one that stuck in my mind because we had to explain how the people getting placebo could be having such a positive effect, better than people getting the actual treatment. So there's, and then another thing very, very important from this study that needs to be pointed out and also relates to the previous point. If you see an increase to 20.3 months in the juice group and only 14.5 months in the extract group, this tells you something, that there are hundreds of substances in the juice, and some of these may get lost in the creation of that extract. They may have tried to bring forward certain substances in the pomegranate. They may have eliminated other substances that were also beneficial.
Might have been heated.
All kinds of possibilities, right?
So was that everything that they found in that study?
No, because they also looked at a subgroup of patients who had a particular mutation, and this mutation, which is called AA, I won't go into the specifics of it, but it's something found in about 20 to 30% of people. So it's fairly widespread. And those people had a doubling or so of the PSA time, much better than any other group. It was from 13.6 months to 25.6 months. So they had a very profound improvement, whereas as the group as a whole had an improvement, but it wasn't so profound. So this mutation is a mutation that reduces your ability to counteract free radical oxidant damage. In other words, it means that you have a greater reliance on antioxidants in your food, and you're probably more prone to be deficient in antioxidants. That's what that mutation, that AA mutation, what it means. Mm-hmm. Those people had a profound near doubling of the PSA doubling time. That's extremely interesting, because what that seems to indicate is that one of the ways that pomegranate works is by countering free radical or singlet oxygen damage, reactive oxygen species as they're called. It counteracts the negative effect of oxidation and acts as an antioxidant. So that's no surprise, because we've of course known for 30 years that there are antioxidants in pomegranate, and one would suspect that that's one of the ways in which they work. But I think this is a more scientific proof of the fact that part of the benefit of the pomegranate juice or the pomegranate extract comes about exactly that way, by counteracting free radicals within the body that are helping to drive the prostate cancer. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming impression that I have from all of these studies is that pomegranate is a very powerful and effective food substance that should be further explored, of course, and should be incorporated in a non-toxic way into the regimen of a lot of people who are dealing with cancer.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to me that it seems to be that many of the foods that we discuss that have these anti-cancer effects have a very strong color to them. In this case, a kind of a bright and deep red color. And that's not uncommon in a lot of the other topics that we discuss, nutritionally speaking. So does that have a relationship, do you think? The compound that, in this case, the pomegranate color?
It does.
Effect? Yeah.
Yes, and I can't explain the biochemistry of that. There may be a good explanation, but even in government recommendations in terms of diet, they often talk about eating several cups of colorful fruits and vegetables.
That's interesting. I wouldn't want to eat a pomegranate wearing this white shirt.
No, not advised.
It would definitely be splattered with, because when you eat a pomegranate, you really dig into them, and they pour it all over the place.
It's a bit messy. I'm very interested in how one translates these results into practical advice for people, myself included. And you could take just a glass of pomegranate juice per day, but the problem with that for me is that there's a lot of natural sugars in pomegranate juice. They're just loaded with sugars, which makes them very tasty, but also problematic for people who are trying to control their intake of carbohydrates, as I am and as numerous people are.
Right.
So there is, luckily for us, there is a workaround, and that is that just pomegranates minus the sugar have been made up into a powder, and that's a commercially available product.
Oh, nice.
I can show you if you want my
Well,
show.
are we done looking at the studies? Maybe
I
we do
think
that at...
I think we're done looking at this.
Okay.
There's a lot more to say, and there are studies that show positive effects in other cancers,
Okay.
but not the powerful positive clinical trial data that we have for prostate. That's
Okay.
where they put the money, and that's where they saw the results, and so I think that's sort of the breakthrough.
Well, I hope that women in the audience are not feeling left out of this equation. I think maybe the antioxidant effect might, as you've suggested, have an overall health benefit for either gender. There were no studies specific to any women-related disease?
There was a study, and I'll reference it in the notes, of very interesting effect against cancer stem cells in breast cancer.
Oh, okay.
But that's a cell line laboratory study, not a clinical
All right.
trial.
Okay.
But we'll give the reference to that.
Okay.
But
It showed some positive effect in the lab.
Very positive effect.
Okay.
And of course, there are no medicines approved for the killing of cancer stem cells.
Right.
There's only one or two repurposed chemicals that may have a similar effect in killing cancer stem cells, but they have considerable toxicity to them.
Right.
So the fact when you find a natural agent that kills cancer stem cells, that's a super important finding, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Well, good. That's encouraging, but not something that you would want to rely on the same way you would an actual clinical trial like we discussed with the prostate.
Right. And I'm sensitive to the question, where are your clinical trials? Because there are 26 million articles in PubMed, and usually you can find one or two that show some positive effect, but you're not going to go running off after the hundreds of possible natural remedies that could possibly kill your cancer cells. You know, it's understandable. People would love to see clinical trial data, and I don't blame them. We don't always have that data, so sometimes we go with the best data that we have available.
Right.
But in this case, we have strong data to
Right.
support the use of pomegranate in various forms in prostate cancer, especially the situation where somebody has been treated and about a third of those people are going to have some rise in the PSA as they go along after treatment. And for those people who are sort of the worried well, if you will, they want to do something that they can do to slow or knock back that rise in the PSA, and pomegranate is a really good candidate for that. It doesn't mean it's going to be necessarily the only thing you do, because
Right.
there are other things as well of a natural nature that you could use, and they can synergize. I would encourage people to talk to their oncologists or urologists, whatever the case may be, or if they're being treated or preventatively for breast cancer. Of course, talk to your doctor about this, because we don't want to encourage cognitive dissonance. We don't want to create a situation of mental stress or anguish over you taking a course without your doctor's agreement. And very often the doctors nowadays will refer you to a nutritionist or a dietitian who can give you a more professional take, because oncologists have their own set of worries, if you will, or of areas of expertise, and not all of them are experts in the question of diet and supplements and so forth. So they might defer to others in their institution or nearby who have a more specialized knowledge. And I would encourage people to do that. I think it's good for both sides to do that. And I don't want to create stress where there doesn't need to be any stress.
Okay, so getting back to the other subject, you were mentioning that you work very hard to manage your own personal blood sugar. And there are a lot of people in this country. I know you probably give us the statistic. It's something like half
Half.
of the people in this country who are dealing with some kind of metabolic disorder, whether it be obesity, prediabetes, or full blown type 2 diabetes. And so you say you have found something to
Right.
help with the sugar aspect of the pomegranate?
Right. And that is, I'll show my show and tell now.
Okay.
It'll be very, very brief because
I'm in school.
I'm only going to show two things. And,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Organic, freeze-dried pomegranate juice powder, rich
Yeah.
in antioxidants,
Yes.
USDA organic. Oh, that looks good.
Yeah. And the serving is 2 scoops, 5 grams, and the total carbohydrates is 5 grams. That's all.
Okay.
It's all carbohydrate, but they've eliminated some of the sugar. 2 scoops of powder is equivalent to 1 cup pomegranate arils. Arils is the technical term for the seeds of the pomegranate, the
Okay.
part that
Arils. Okay.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
that contains the juice.
Okay.
So if you were to add 4 scoops of this per day, if you had 4 scoops, in other words, let's say you added this to a smoothie,
Right.
you would have the equivalent of what was given in most of the clinical trials. About There's no exact amount, and as I showed in one of the studies, the low dose had the same effects as the high dose. So you don't have to worry about the micromillimeter amount of how much you're getting of this, as long as you're within the ballpark. And if you just sort of make this part of your red or purple smoothie, it's going to bring you into the ballpark of what was given in the trials, and will have that effect. It certainly should have the antioxidant effect, and will have some of the effects of the other substances within the pomegranate.
And all your smoothie recipes are also in the book and on themossreport.com. I think we have the purple smoothie recipe listed as well there.
And I can't go into any, scientific detail about the synergy, but as I said in the book, I assume and rely on the synergy because there are about 50 examples that I give in the book of synergy among anti-cancer food elements. I make my smoothies, as people may know, with a particular brand of soy milk because the soy contains genistein and the isoflavones, and this also works with the other ingredients in the smoothie. So smoothies are a really good idea for people, and they're trendy, but they also have a very strong scientific basis in this synergistic effect, the greater than additive effect of taking various things simultaneously. So that's one product. And then the other product I just want to show, and it's this, which is a very unusual product. The other one
Pomegranate syrup. Ooh,
correct,
that sounds sweet.
with no sugar added.
Okay.
And this has 8 grams of sugar to a, I don't know, what is the serving size? It is 15 grams, half an ounce, every half an ounce of this organic pure pomegranate extract has nothing but pomegranate in it, organic pomegranate juice that's been distilled down to a very thick consistency. And you can use this in any situation where you would use molasses, syrup, put it on yogurt, whatever. You can't
I bet that would be good on yogurt.
It is very good, and I use it very sparingly. Put it in as
Maybe a salad dressing.
be great in a salad dressing, definitely. Wherever you would want to use have some sweetener, but control the amount. So you could use this, and it's a way of getting a very concentrated form of the juice. Both of these are forms of juice. You understand that getting back to the powder, all it is a freeze-dried, cold-pressed, ripe pomegranates, and just they use the rind, the pith, and the arrows
Oh,
included.
oh, I was going to ask that because you had mentioned earlier that the natural remedies of yesteryear were focusing around the pith and the peel and so forth. So I was going to
Correct.
say
Uh,
maybe this would be a good because I would imagine that the juice doesn't have all of that in there.
True. True. I mean, it depends on the method in which
Right.
it's being manufactured. But I
No, I
was,
think the powder is a great tip, Dad. That's a good find.
yeah, and I use it a
And
lot.
less carbohydrates than the straight juice.
Far less, far
Hmm.
less. And since to make a smoothie, you do need some sweetener, in my opinion.
Right.
I am not of the, the no sweetener at all, but the sweetening should come from the fruit, or in this case, minimal amount of sugar included in the powder, as opposed to throwing in the arrows. And plus, the arrow, I've tried it recently with the arrows, and you get a grittiness to the smoothie.
You
It's
mean if you just add the pomegranate seeds right into your
right,
smoothie and
right,
blend it up?
right. I guess it depends a lot on your blender, but you don't have that problem, the grittiness problem, if it is a problem, as it is for some people in my household.
Hmm.
Then you this blends perfectly.
Hmm. You're saying Mom didn't like it.
That's right. To put it in short terms, yes,
Well, okay. Well, that's important.
it is
I mean,
important.
it's important actually that the recipe tastes good because if it doesn't, you're going to be less likely to make it every day or have it be part of the routine. So having it taste good is an important aspect of this whole
Right.
thing. It's not only about the nutrient value.
No, and it's more of a problem with the green smoothies, which tend to be more on the savory side, let's
Hmm.
say, than the purple or the red smoothies, which contain more fruit. So therefore, they're easier. They go down easier.
Well, I think the freeze-dried pomegranate product, the organic product, is a real pro tip. I think that's great. Thank you very much
You're
for doing the research, digging up all these facts, and sharing with us the background of those studies and the history of the economic aspects of it, and all of that, and the antioxidant effect. I think that this has been a good lesson, very informative, and a great action item to be able to go out and get some of that pomegranate powder or pomegranate juice and start adding it into the diet, especially for someone like myself who doesn't yet have any issues with their prostate, but I'm at that age now where it's important for me to be proactive and doing things of preventative nature
right.
to try to push back any potential issues. And if this can be added to my diet, and it apparently can pretty easily, tastes good, then I think I'm going to start taking it.
Good. Sounds good.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm happy, and let's just encourage people to uh, fill up that self-help space with positive, uh, scientifically documented ways of reducing your risk of cancer.
Okay, that's great. So for now, for the Moss Report, I'm Ben Moss. How are you healing today?